Under Capricorn is the final film in our 1940s Alfred Hitchcock arc. Yes, it is coming to an end. We have covered a lot of amazing Hitchcock films, and today we're covering Under Capricorn on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Yes, we have made it to the finish line. We have finally conquered 1940s Alfred Hitchcock, and my God, was it difficult at the end for us. And by us, I am referring to myself and my co-host, not guest host, Shay Mulvaney.
How you doing, Harry? Let's get cracking into this not particularly good film, shall we say?
Yeah, it's Under Capricorn, and to be honest, we kind of agreed we're going to keep this one pretty short, because the less time that we spend talking about Under Capricorn, the better. Because it's not even like it's like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where you can kind of slag it. It's just boring. It's just
boring.
an abhorrently boring film. I nearly fell asleep twice watching it.
It took me two sittings to watch it. I started it and I couldn't finish it that night. I was just so bored at my school. So
yeah, don't bother watching this. Just don't. It's like, you can if you really want to watch all of Hitchcock's films, but like, I genuinely thought this was one of the most boring films I've ever seen. Seriously.
It's not good.
Yeah. I reckon we just get straight into it. What do you think?
I think so, yeah. There's nothing...
Yeah, we'll throw our facts in as we go through it. Because I feel like when we go through the film, we're not going to have an awful lot to say. So yeah, it's set in Australia, and King William has sent a new governor to Australia, and with him is his cousin Charles. Charles is pretty much the main protagonist of the film. He's played by Michael Wilding, and he shows up. To be honest, it looks good. Like, it's a pretty cool looking opening scene, because again, it's all in color, and we have all the guards there as the ship docks. It's a pretty lively looking frame, I'll give it that. And Mr. Potter, the banker, where have you heard that before, comes up and he gets chatting away to Charles and basically says, "Oh, I am the local banker. You want to do business with me? Come with me." And he's like, "Okay, I will." They go to Potter's bank and they get chatting about this, that, and the other, and about kind of Australia at the time, because it's set in the 1800s, where a lot of people in Australia were ex-cons who, part of their sentence in Britain or the British Isles or wherever you were just sent to Australia to start a new life. And some people achieved this new life, and one of those people is a guy called Sam Flusky. What a name. Sam Flusky. And he is played by Joseph Cotton. This Flusky guy comes into the bank and he's looking for Potter, and he's a landowner. We know that much about him, and we know he's a bit rough, and Potter's like, "Oh God, I really don't want to have to deal with him." But he comes in to Potter's office and he gets chatting away to Charles as well, and he hears from Charles' surname that he is Irish. Is he though?
That, yeah.
Yeah, thick English accent. But he's Irish. He's from the west of Ireland. And Potter says to Charles, "Oh, if Flusky ever invites you to his house, don't go." So Flusky, Potter, and Charles, they're chatting away and they're leaving Potter's bank, and on their way out, a fella comes up to the lads, and he's trying to like put something with it, like inside of a newspaper, in Flusky's hand, and Flusky kind of shoulders him away, and your man falls over, and it's just a human head. It's just a small human head wrapped in newspaper, which falls out onto the street. Inevitably, Charles is like, "What was that? What happened there?" And Flusky kind of just nonchalantly goes, "Oh, it's just a miniature human head that's been shriveled up over time. It's like a currency over here." What?
Yeah, Charles. Apparently he's heard the name Flusky before, because he was kind of unsure. He's like, "Oh, I kind of recognise that name." But so obviously this Flusky guy has made a bit of a name for himself for whatever reason. But look, Flusky basically comes to Charles then with a proposition. He says to him, "Look, there's a bunch of land that I want to buy. I'm going to give you the money to buy it, and then I'm going to buy it from you for a bigger price then. So you'll make a bit of money out of the deal. I'm going to get this land that I want, and then we're both going to be happy. And Charles is like, it seems not exactly above board, but anyway, kind of says, look, kind of says I'll go with it, but then he kind of then runs it past his cousin. So anyway, Flusky examines a newly released prisoner. Adair is interested to find out that Flusky doesn't like horse thieves or murderers, which will be important later on. So they, as Harry said then, they come out and they come to the suspicious man's head. But then, like I said, Charles comes to this mansion of his governor cousin, and turns out that Flusky's had a bit of a trouble with Mr. Corrigan, who's kind of the governor's right-hand man. But he says, look, everyone has trouble with Mr. Corrigan. No one likes Mr. Corrigan. Everyone has a bit of trouble with him. So Charles says, look, he's invited me to dinner tomorrow night. This Sam Flusky guy, he's invited me to dinner. I'm going to go, and the governor's like, get out of it. I don't want you going there. This guy is kind of trouble. You don't want to be going there. At this point, the governor's even not too sure. He knows he's heard the name Flusky, but even he's like, I know I've heard the name. I can't place where the name is from, but just be on the cautious side. There's obviously a reason why I kind of know the name. So look, I can't exactly place where I know this dude from, but considering there's something going on in my head saying don't go there, so just don't go there. I don't want you going there.
So he goes there.
Yeah, Charles is like, fuck it, I'm just going to go there. Fuck it.
Yeah, next scene he goes there. Yeah, the next scene, it's nighttime and he's going there. It's the following night. And the fella who rides the carriage stops outside Flusky's house, and he looks at Flusky's house and they're like, oh, that's a pretty nice gaff. And he gets out and your man kind of goes to leave and he's like, oh, what, you're going all the way back to Sydney just to come back? No, will you just stay here for me? I won't be that long. And he's like, I'm not staying here, buddy. That's a dodgy spot you're going into. I have no problem coming back and picking you up, but I am not hanging around here. That guy's crazy. And we're like, oh, really? But his house seems so nice. And he goes in and straight away we see that all the staff are basically just like physically assaulting each other with like batons and stuff. They're all piling into each other in the kitchen, all the cooks.
Yeah, it's a free-for-all.
Too many cooks.
Yeah, literally too many cooks in the kitchen. It's a free-for-all. Clearly they're not exactly kept in the best shape. Like they're just going around knocking the shit out of each other. Flusky's obviously kind of taken aback by this, but it turns out that these maids, these kitchen cooks, are they're prisoners who have been sent here to do some work, and basically if they get out of line again, they're going to go back to prison. So it's in their interests to behave well, but obviously they're not really doing that. But it's broken up by Millie, who's like the main housekeeper, who, it's unclear if she is an ex-con. I don't think she is. I think she's just Sam's kind of obviously trusted housemaid. So it's her job to kind of keep these people in shape. So anyway, Flusky comes in and he's showing around a bunch of social niceties, class things. Yeah, so he's showing around this big old mansion. Pretty nice looking set, I have to say. It's one of the few things I did like about the film is that the pretty nice camera work as well. But yeah, it's a nice looking mansion, but there's very distracting music going on during the scene, like way too romanticized. Obviously just hitting you over the head with the fact that this is like a really fine establishment that you should take note of. Anyway, there's a bunch of people then who Charles gets introduced to, people of good social standing. Mrs. Flusky isn't there yet, which is causing some consternation for some of the other guests, because like it's kind of the proper thing to do would be for her to be greeting people as they come in and obviously acting like the good kind of housewife. And she's not doing that, which is obviously causing a few murmurs. So everyone takes their place for dinner. As the conversation starts, Mrs. Flusky arrives and then she comes in her bare feet. So I can imagine Quentin Tarantino's favourite scene, probably in this. Yeah, she comes in her bare feet.
She looks like a ghost.
Yeah, literally, she's obviously not. She's not in the best standing. She's kind of muttering on, kind of not incoherently, but certainly like there's not too much rhyme or rhythm to what she's saying. So it turns out then she's obviously apologising for the fact that she's a bit late, trying to play the good housewife, but Turns out that Henrietta and Charles actually know each other because they're both from Ireland, from the west of Ireland, from a small town. So they start kind of
very Irish.
very
Ingrid
Irish.
Bergman.
We all know each
Ingrid
other.
Bergman, who plays her, has a great Irish accent as well. She just speaks how she normally speaks. She's Swedish, isn't she?
Yeah, she's Swedish. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this film, if you have a Swedish or British accent, you are in fact Irish.
I can understand that a little bit more with the British thing because, like, you can imagine some Irish people who maybe then moved to England, especially if you have like a certain status. Maybe you just grew up with the accent. But yeah, it makes no sense for Ingrid Bergman to not have an Irish accent. But anyway, look,
No.
there's a lot more things to get upset about with this film than the accent, so I'm gonna let it slide. So yeah, look, they start smiling with the fact that they've like obviously been reunited in this place, literally the other side of the world. But she doesn't look well at all. So she says she's basically asking after Charles' sister because they kind of knew each other back in the day. But then she's clearly not doing that well. So she's like, "Excuse me, I'm gonna have to just kind of leave here." So Charles escorts her out of the room, and Sam Flusky's looking uncomfortable at this point because he obviously knows that she's kind of made a bit of a scene, and it doesn't look well on him if she's making a scene. So kind of it's all is not too well in the Flusky marriage, it looks like, at this point in time.
Yeah, and if he thought she caused a scene, then she then goes upstairs, and instead of calling for her husband, she calls for Charles over and over and over again. And he just runs up the stairs, and he's like, What can I do?" And she was like, get your pistol. And he's like, "Oh my god." Meanwhile, Flusky's kind of stood there like, what is happening here? So he gets his pistol, and he goes up, and he goes into her bedroom, and she's like, there's a rat, and she shoots the rat, which is like hiding in her fireplace. And that's that scene. That's that scene. They go out for a walk then, Flusky and Charles. And this was the first time in the film where I started to nod off.
First of many, I'm sure.
Genuinely, my notes obviously I went back then, but my notes literally say like, he shoots rat. They're outside? So, yeah, I clearly like woke up and started writing notes again before I realized that I'd fallen asleep. Yeah, this film bored me to sleep. I think 3 times. 3 times I sort of just drifted off and then woke back up again.
Like I said, I started last week fairly late. Like, I was expecting to get it finished that night, but I was not prepared for how boring it would be, so I literally had to finish it in 2 sittings because I would have fallen asleep. I literally would have fallen asleep if not for the fact I made that decision.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Sam...
I wouldn't mind, but I was watching this in the middle of the day. I was watching this like in the afternoon. Like, I was just out of bed. I wasn't even tired before this film. This film sapped the energy out of me.
It will put you to sleep.
Yeah,
don't watch this film.
They get chatting away about Flusky's marriage and how Charles knows her from Ireland, and basically they get acquainted and they come to the conclusion that it might be best if Charles starts hanging around with Henrietta a bit more, because she actually showed a bit of character towards the end whenever the rat showed up, and maybe she needs a bit of that old Irish charm to make her realize that she's kind of gotten into a bit of a slump and a rut, and she's not being, I guess, ladylike. She's locking herself in a room. She's not really socializing with people, and maybe she just needs someone from back home to kind of remind her of how good things can be, and to get her back out into the social sphere, if you will.
Yeah, Sam actually, this is where we find out that Sam, basically during this walk and talk, Sorkin-esque walk and talk, although it's nowhere near as good as a Sorkin-esque walk and talk, we learned that Sam has been, well, he said that people were determined to get him back home, and something went down and he ended up getting 7 years transportation, so he was kind of lucky to escape the death penalty, really. But Henrietta stayed loyal to him, and she sold everything she had and she followed him. He made money while he was on the inside to make it up to her, but then things changed, he says, after he got out, and there was like just a gulf between them, and they haven't really managed to recover that gulf. There's just a distance between them that has never been recovered. So that's why then he asks Charles to be like, look, maybe you being here, bit of a link from home, maybe if you're here and you start to befriend her, she'll start to open up and she'll start to be the person she kind of was before all the shit went down. So yeah, that's the crux of this this relationship, that Sam's obviously on board at this point in time with Charles' presence. He actually could suggest it.
So yeah, the governor is pissed because basically the reason that they're doing this whole sort of land deal between Flusky and Charles is that Flusky has basically bought the maximum amount of land that a person can buy from the king in Australia, but there's nothing in the legislation that says that you can't buy land in a private deal from someone else. So basically he's getting him to buy the land so that he can then buy it off of him. Therefore, he's not actually buying it from the king. But the governor's issue is this land is smack bang in the city centre of Sydney. And the governor is pissed because he has kind of deduced where he knew the name from earlier with Flusky. He's a rumoured murderer. And he's basically, he just calls him scum. He calls him scum over and over again. He's like, I can't believe you're dealing with this scum. You're letting this scum into the city. You're letting him buy all this land. It's disgraceful. Like, I bring you to this country and you're already fucking shit up.
Yeah, turns out that Sam apparently murdered Hattie's brother Dermot in quote unquote in cold blood. But then Sam's like, look, just sign the fucking forms. There's literally no legal basis for you not to sign the forms because it's a transaction between two kind of private parties. You can't stand in the way. It's literally all you have to do, all you must legally do is sign the forms. So the governor is pissed, but he does anyway because he can't do anything else. There's no other recourse for him. So then Charles goes back to visit Hattie. Hattie is offended when Charles tells her that she was very drunk at the party. Again, another role from Ingrid Bergman in a Hitchcock film where apparently she's an alcoholic. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. But anyway, she says that, look, there are so many things that her and her husband Sam don't talk about, including her drinking issues. So like she's kind of offended that someone who's not even a part of the marriage obviously is the one to bring it up. She says that he lived on her will, but it's been exhausted. And then Charles tries to cheer her up by making plans, but look, she's not interested. She obviously fobs him off. And then Millie walks past and Charles says she doesn't like him, but Millie sings her praises. So yeah, Millie's obviously pretending, at least at this point, to be pro Mrs. Flusky, who's obviously our pro. Yeah.
She's just a bit of a Euroshop Mrs. Danvers at the end of the day.
Yeah, like, we're meant to think that she's this conniving, manipulative schemer, but at no point really. I mean, there's a couple of scenes, I suppose, that aren't, maybe a little bit later, but there aren't. There's one scene in particular, maybe I'll speak about it when I get to it. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, she's just like...
Yeah, there's one scene where I was like, oh, she's quite menacing.
Yeah.
But besides that, she just seems like a, I don't know, almost childish.
Very ineffective.
Like almost like a, yeah. She's just kind of almost like schoolgirl crush on Flusky whilst standing in the corner listening to people, but not really doing much with it. Like, she plays one prank on Mrs. Flusky, and that's about as twisted as she gets until the very end, where she does get quite twisted.
Yeah, she's not very effective, I think it's fair to say. Anyway, the next day, Henriette is dressed up and she looks much happier. So obviously Charles has gotten into her ear, and yeah, she's just kind of more herself now that she's hanging around with Charles. But Millie eavesdrops as Charles tells Henriette to take the keys from her, and basically Charles says to her, "Look, you have to start acting like the boss of the house. You have to start acting like these people's employer. They have to kind of take their orders from you," which obviously Millie isn't happy about because up to now that's been her job, and she's kind of liked the power, and she wants Mr. Flusky to think of her that way. So she runs upstairs. She tells Winter, who's kind of the butler, I would say, or certainly like, is he probably the butler? Would you say?
I would say so, yeah.
Probably the butler. I'll call him the butler. So she tells Mr. Winter to keep his mouth shut. And she grabs the wine bottles, and Winter brings them down to the kitchen. So then Hattie finally starts...
he's a secretary. He gets hired as a secretary.
Secretary, that's right. So he's the secretary. So anyway, he brings the wine bottles down. And just as Hattie starts finally acting like confidently and assertively for the first time in a long time, she's telling basically people what to do in the kitchen. Just as she starts doing this, Millie, Millie asks for the keys, and then Winter kind of drops the bottles on the table. So all the women from earlier start like cackling like a bunch of hyenas. And then Hattie runs upstairs. She's obviously just devastated because she's been embarrassed in this public setting in front of people who obviously she's in charge of. So her authority has been undermined, and that's 1 point to Millie, I would say.
Oh yeah, very much so. And Charles kind of catches wind of all of this that's going on, and he says it to Flusky. He's pretty pissed, and Flusky kind of brushes it off as if it's not that important. It's like, oh, come on, man. It's like, it's pretty telling when like everybody in the house wants Millie to have the keys for all the house and Millie to control the house when Mrs. Flusky's clearly trying to make an effort. It's like nobody in the house actually really cares about her. So Charles kind of takes exception to this, and he goes up to the room to try and sort of comfort her. And he goes up and he's like, "Listen, I know things didn't go the way you wanted to. You were trying to kind of take command of your house, and things didn't go the way you wanted it. But like, you just need to have a bit more courage, and you just got to stick with it." And she was like, "I don't think I have the courage." And he was like, "No, you do." And they kiss. Oh, damn, they kiss. And he actually locks the door, which Millie takes exception to, because Millie's kind of eavesdropping and she tries to go in. And Millie holds on to this scene for basically the whole film. She references it about 7 times whenever anyone has a chat. She's like, "Oh, well, remember that time you were in the room and you locked the door? You guys were basically naked." Her version of like naked is interesting as well. She later on in the film she calls Henrietta half naked, and she's literally like, I think the only thing exposed is like her hands. Like, yeah, I don't know. Millie,
she's a strange character.
With Mrs. Danvers, there was like Mrs. Danvers would like set the new Mrs. De Winter up, expose her after setting her up, and then make her feel like shit after exposing her. Whereas with Millie, she eavesdrops over a person and then tries to expose them. There's no clever setting them up for failure.
Yeah, she's not as cunning, and she's not as calculated, and she's not as like
interesting,
clearly,
memorable.
Mrs. De Winter had like clear reasons to do what she did, and obviously we'll find out Millie's reasons later. Basically, spoiler alert: she's in love with Mr. I forgot his name.
Yeah,
Mr. Flusky. She's in love with Mr. Flusky. So it's kind of similar with Mrs. De Winter, because she was in love with the late Mrs. De Winter, but like her motivations were just so much clearer, and even leaving aside,
well executed,
and even leaving aside the romance, like you could believe that was the way she would kind of react. Whereas Millie, there's no breadcrumbs that you can follow as an audience member.
Yeah.
Anyway, Millie then tells, as Harry was saying, it's one of the first, for the first time, but not for the only time, she tells Mr. Flusky that Hattie should have kept her out of the kitchen, and she's obviously like making these little insinuations that something was going on because they locked the door.
Mm-hmm.
Then Charles and Millie then argue when she again insinuates something's going on. So then Sam tells everyone to leave. He's just pissed off at this point. He's like, "Look, everyone get the fuck out. I'm sick of hearing all these different voices in my head. Let me just deal with this. Isn't going to deal with it." So, but it turns out that maybe Millie's little devil on the shoulder, maybe that's had an effect, because he seems unsure as to Charles' motivations at this point. Then when he tells everyone to leave, he's like, "Oh, is there something to that?" Like, but I think even at this point he's not exactly following it too much. It's maybe he's just more open to the idea that maybe there could be something going on. So then Millie just gets pissed off. She's like, "Look, my authority's been undermined time after time. I'm not staying here. I'm not staying here as long as, well, if this is the case, so I quit." So she leaves in a horse and cart, and Henrietta notices, and she runs downstairs distraught, because obviously at this point she's quite fond of Millie. Sam orders then Winter to look after breakfast, and Hattie's distressed to hear that Millie's resigned, so she goes into the kitchen and she tells the staff that no one's going to be beaten in this house anymore, because Millie was beating the staff up a little bit earlier on. She says no one's going to be beaten in this house, but there can't be any fighting and there can't be any stealing, otherwise they're going to make sure you get sent back to prison. So Millie's decision to leave has probably woken Henrietta out from her stupor, because she seems to make an active decision to get more involved around the house and start doing more of the duties that you would associate a lady in her kind of class at the time to be doing.
So yeah, one of the tasks that she does is she goes into all the kind of maids, and she's like, whoever cooks the best meal can become the head cook. And it's kind of like the one scene of comedy in the film then, where Charles, Sam, and Henrietta all sit down, and all of these cooks come out and they present their meals, and it's like Sam's meal looks fine, it's just a bit small, and then Henrietta's just like way smaller, and then you see Charles's meal and it's just like gloop on a plate, and they're all kind of unimpressed with each other. They're like, oh god, the house is already starting to kind of fall apart without Millie because they can't even have a proper meal. And then they kind of get wind that the governor's ball is coming up, and Charles thinks it's a great idea to go. So, because she's obviously trying to become the lady of the house, she's trying to become more ladylike. Henrietta's like, yeah, no, I'm gonna go to this, and she gets all dressed up, and yeah, we get one of the two scenes in this film, I would argue, that are in any way memorable, where she comes down the stairs all dressed up and everything, and Charles says she looks amazing, and the camera work's quite clever because we're looking at her on the stairs, and then we kind of pan to behind the hands of Sam, and he's holding this necklace with red rubies, and he's kind of been uninvolved in much to do with Henrietta throughout the film. He doesn't really. This almost feels like him finally making an effort, and he's like, "Oh, you look absolutely amazing. Wouldn't it just look even better if you had like a collar of red rubies?" Because he's got it hidden behind his back, and Charles butts in and goes, "Oh, I don't know. I don't think it would go with that dress." And then she agrees with Charles, and she's like, "Yeah, are you joking? Red rubies with this dress?" And he's like, "Oh, it was just a thought I had," and he just kind of slips them into his back pocket. So it's kind of the little bit of tension that we have in the relationship is kind of felt there, because it's kind of like a stinging moment for Sam whenever he's finally kind of made an emotional effort with his other half, that it's instantly shot down by the guy who he's kind of asking to try and bring her back to her old self again. And then Charles just whisks her off to this ball. The two of them go out in a bit of a rush, and Millie shows back up again at the house.
Yeah, Millie turns back up.
Yeah, she starts planting some seeds.
Yeah, she's like, look, can I just stay the night? I be honest, I forget what reason she gave. Doesn't really matter. But anyway,
she just wants to look after the house or something. I don't know.
She wants to look after the house. Whatever reason she has, it doesn't really matter, because her real reason is that she wants to use this opportunity to just start twisting the knife in, and she wants to really hammer home the idea in Sam's head that Millie and Charles are having an affair. So she's pretending that it's like, that's just stuff that's coming into her head, and she's trying to then pass it off as, I'm sure it was nothing actually. I'm sure I just got carried away. But clearly she keeps mentioning the fact that the door was locked, and that like they've obviously been growing closer. So it's probably the first time that Sam is seriously considering the fact that, or the idea that something's going on between Henrietta and Charles. So it looks like Millie's finally starting to impress that kind of idea on Sam. But anyway, we cut to the ball, and it turns out that Charles filled out the invitation card himself, because when we get in, there's a couple of, maybe a kind of a funny moment where the two guys figure out that it's like that's not the governor's handwriting, that's someone else's handwriting. So obviously Charles has managed to blag an invitation to this, and he's pretended that the Fluskies have been invited. Then as soon as the other guests see Mrs. Flusky dancing with someone who's not her husband, they start to whisper, and it's not exactly the done thing at the time. It's like, oh, she's dancing with someone who's not her husband. So the governor comes over to Charles, and he's like, look, I told you not to come. I told you not to get involved with these people. Get the fuck out, kind of thing. Just leave. I don't want you here. But then Henrietta comes over, and the governor has to act nice because she's a woman of social standing. She's a woman of class. So is Charles in a way, but she certainly is. So he tries to be polite, and he says, oh yeah, look, just stay for dinner. And then Charles then, he knows that the governor is kind of being seduced a little bit by Henrietta's presence, that he wants to try and put on a good front. Because Charles is like, oh, but you just told me, look, I've just been told to go. We can't stay, Henrietta, we have to leave. And then he knows that the governor's going to back down, and he's going to kind of pretend that he never said that all along. The general ends up backing down because obviously he doesn't want Henrietta to think that he turned them away. So Sam arrives then as that kind of, she's over having a chat with the governor. Sam arrives because he's decided that Millie might be onto something with her theory. And he sees Henrietta talking to the governor, and he comes in and he barges in on the conversation, basically just acting like a bit of a control freak at this point. Starts talking about, look, I grew up as a stable boy, and everyone here treats me with contempt because I'm not from the same social class as these people, yada yada yada. But then Charles tells Henrietta, Henrietta leaves. She's distressed, obviously, that her husband's made this kind of scene. And then Charles then tries to comfort Henrietta, and he's like, look, Sam's just jealous. She tries to make excuses for him, saying, oh no, like, he's looked after me for a long time. And then she goes on this kind of reminiscing journey about their time together, growing up, how they kind of knew each other when he was a stable boy and she was kind of a woman of standing back in Ireland. And she kind of starts to recount more and more stories about how and when they fell in love, and then she tells the story that finally tells the truth about the day, that fateful day, basically, where people thought that Sam had killed her husband, or her brother, Dermot.
Yeah.
But it turns out that it was Henrietta all along, because her brother found out that she had gotten married to Sam, and he wasn't happy about this, so he pulled a gun on them. So in defence, she managed to get like a horse gun from nearby, and she, just in a panic, she killed her husband, or her brother, I keep saying husband. She killed her brother, Dermot, basically in defence of Sam, because she thought that Dermot would have killed Sam if she hadn't done that. So yeah, she's in bits about this, really.
Yeah, and that Sam basically took the fall for it because obviously she's a woman of like high class, whereas he was just a stable boy. So it wasn't as like socially damaging for him to kind of get done for it, and he ended up, because through some strings being pulled, I feel he ended up just getting sentenced to living in Australia rather than actually being hung, because they kind of had like a 2 strikes and you're out rule, it seems. Because they're always like, oh, you've already had your first strike, second strike, and you get the noose. So it kind of feels like, whether it's in Australia or just in general in the British colonies at the time, it was like, 2 strikes and you're out. You can murder one person, and we'll send you to Australia. Murder 2 people, now that's too far. And so she admits that she murdered Dermot, and then they go back to the Flusky residence, but Sam kicks Charles out of the house. They get into an argument, a bit of a heated argument over the ball and all that, and Sam kicks him out, and Charles takes Flusky's like prize mare, because obviously, funnily enough, the 2 things he doesn't hire are murderers and people who steal horses. His wife's a murderer, and the other fella who he's led into his house has just stolen his horse. But he doesn't get very far. He hits the fence just outside. This is all off camera. He hits the fence. The horse breaks its leg. He comes back in. He says it tried to jump the fence. It failed. It kind of booked him over the fence, so he was okay, but it broke its leg. So then Sam has to go out and put down his prized mare. He shoots it in the head, and he comes back in, and he gets pretty angry at old Sam, and it seems like an accident. It looks like he hits him with the gun, but the gun goes off and shoots him. I don't think he actually shot him, did he? No, it looked like he hit him with the gun, but it just went off by accident.
Yeah, some sort of scuffle happens. So I think whether he's trying to hit him with the gun or he's just trying to hit him with his fist, and then it happened to kind of clumsily shoot him by accident. I'm pretty sure it's not intentional, but he managed to he wanted to physically harm him in some way, but he didn't want to shoot him. So Charles, he accidentally shoots Charles, and then we're left with the thought that he's accidentally kind of killed Charles. He's accidentally killed his love rival. Then Millie, we cut to Millie, who's back at the house now. She seems to be back firmly ensconced in the Flusky residence, back at her old job. Then we cut back to the hospital where Henrietta is kind of in bits. She's just waiting anxiously to find out if Charles is okay. in the room, the general is ranting with he's basically ranting about Charles being an irresponsible idiot. He asks Charles, he's like, Charles, look, you have to give me a statement on Mr. Flusky, otherwise I'm not going to prove that this guy shot you. I can give this guy the death penalty if you corroborate what my theory is to that he shot you on purpose. But like Charles doesn't really help, and the general says to Henrietta that if Charles recovers, he's going to send him home to Ireland in disgrace, and if he dies, he's going to hang Sam because, as far as he's concerned, Sam has murdered Charles in cold blood. So either she's going to be without Sam, who's going to die of the noose, or she's going to be without Charles, who's going to have been deported back to Ireland.
Well, actually, no, it's more she'll either be without both of them, or she'll be without, like, either way, she's never seen
Sam again,
Charles again.
Oh, Charles,
so, yeah, so the Charles decision's made. Either he gets deported or he's dead.
That's true. Yeah. And then she also could be without Sam if Sam is found guilty of this murder. So yeah, her whole world is kind of crumbling around her at this point.
So yeah, she just kind of lets it slip then to the general that she actually killed Dermot, because her plan is pretty much to with that whole 2 strikes and you're out thing. It's like, oh well, I'll just kind of get rid of that first strike, and give it to me. He didn't actually kill my brother. I killed my brother. And the governor's like, whoa, that's a lot of information. We'll come back to that discussion in a bit. She goes back to the house and she kind of explains everything to Flusky, and Flusky's like, no, not a hope. I'm done. I'm done with. He's done with this film, and so am I at this point. No, he's done with this, and he basically says that she's gonna be sent back to Ireland.
Yeah, he thinks that she's hatched a plan with Charles for them both to be sent back to Ireland. He basically thinks there's just like some master plan between the two of them that they'll both be sent back to Ireland. He'll be stuck over in Australia, and like that's her way of getting out of this marriage and running off with her new beau. Kind of a master plan, he thinks. So in hospital, then we see Charles. We cut to Charles, who's sitting up in a chair. So he has like his arm in a sling. Turns out he'll be discharged next week, and then he's going to be sent home because the general's had enough. He's pissed off him. The general says to Charles, look, Henrietta's going to be sent home too for the murder of her brother. So she's going to stand trial over there. She's going to be sentenced over there. So then we cut to Sam and Millie, who are discussing Hattie's downturn in mood and about Charles' recovery. And Sam says, look, I'm going to just have to go with Henrietta to Ireland because she needs me there, basically. So he's willing to sacrifice his life in Australia, and Millie's like really kind of horrified. Yeah, she's hurt and horrified to learn about this. She's like, look, you're gonna be a lot less like well off over there than you are here. You have this big house here, you have all this staff. Over there, you'll just be like back to your stable boy days. You'll be nothing. And he's like, yeah, look, I know that, but she needs me, so I'm going to just sell all my positions, and then I'm going to go to Ireland with Henrietta. So Millie is Millie's pretty devastated to learn about this, and then we hear Henrietta shouting for Millie. Sam goes upstairs, but then the camera stays on Millie, so she takes something out of her pocket. But then we cut to Henrietta, who tells Sam that there's something on the bed, and he's like, look, there isn't. And she's like, oh, there is. Like Charles shot it for me, shot something like that for me. He said, look, he didn't. He was humouring you. He didn't want you to think that you were kind of going crazy. He was just humouring you to make you feel better. So there's nothing there. So she's like, oh, okay. But then we cut to kind of, he's trying to comfort her, but then when he leaves, she's still kind of unsure. So she's looking a little bit more afraid. And when she opens the bed covers, we see that kind of small human head from earlier. So it seems like someone's either put it there or it's in her head, one or the other at this point. But yeah, it's more than likely someone has put this there to basically fuck with Henrietta.
Yeah, because she then pretty much just faints on the bed, and when she kind of comes to, she wakes up and sees that Millie has come into her room, and she's got this little vial of like red liquid, so she's obviously been poisoning her. And Millie takes the head and hides it in a basket in her room, and then she pours what was in the red vial into like a glass of brandy, and she gives it to her and says, "Come on, wake up, take this. It'll make you feel better." And yeah, she loses her shit. She starts calling for Sam to come upstairs. He comes up, and he's like, "She's trying to poison me. Check in the basket. There's a head in there. I'm not crazy." And he's like, "Wait, she tried to poison you?" And Millie just drops the glass of brandy and it shatters everywhere. And she's like, "No, I'm not trying to poison her at all." And he's like, "Okay, well, the basket." And he goes over and he opens the basket, and there's a little old human head in there.
Yeah, so it turns out Millie's been roofing. She's been roofing Henrietta at least for a few days, it would seem, if not a lot longer than that, because it's implied and I think it's pretty obvious that Henrietta's downturn in mood and downturn in attitude and downturn in kind of demeanour over the last several weeks or months have been because Millie has been slowly and surely and quietly slipping this stuff into her food and into her drink all this time. So yeah, she's obviously been responsible for Henrietta's kind of bad her bad kind of energy and her bad just her kind of sad demeanour really. So turns out that Millie, she says, "Look, I was in love with Sam this whole time. I couldn't let him leave for you. I couldn't let him do that to himself." So she leaves in disgrace, and Sam's obviously really pissed off with her. Then we cut to Mr. Corrigan, who arrives downstairs to interrogate Flusky. Flusky's like, "No, there's been enough going on today. I'm not talking to you. I don't want anything to do with this."
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Look, get the fuck out of here." But then he's told that a warrant has been issued for his arrest for attempted murder. So basically, the police think that he tried to kill Charles and failed. And obviously, they think already that he's responsible for the death of Dermot, or at least, even though the general has been told by Henrietta that she was the one who killed Dermot, I don't think he's too sure. He thinks he might just be saying that to cover for Sam, to get him off the rap. So they think that Sam, at the very least, has tried to kill Charles. So Sam tries to assure Henrietta that it's going to be okay and that, look, we've always sacrificed things for each other, and this is going to be another sacrifice. So she's kind of in a bad way, but look, he tries to do his best to comfort her. And he's arrested as Hattie and the staff watch. So Hattie then says, "Look, call Sydney for help." So she obviously has some sort of plan cooked up. So we cut to Hattie, who's in the governor's office, and she's begging him for help, him and Mr. Corrigan. She says, "Look, yes, it was an accident. I promise it was an accident. He didn't mean to do that." And then Charles arrives, and Henrietta says, "Look, please tell him what happened wasn't intentional. You know it wasn't intentional." So yeah, it's kind of a build-up where Hitchcock wants us to think maybe he's going to screw over Sam because he wants to be with Henrietta.
Mm-hmm.
But it turns out that he tells the truth.
He does the morally right thing.
At least he does the morally right thing, yeah. So he's like, "Look, that's not what happened at all. It was accidental. There was some sort of scuffle. It was accidental. The gun just kind of went off." And Henrietta then kind of glows with pride, and she just really thanks Sam because he sacrificed this for her. Thanks Charles, I should say, because he sacrificed this. Even though obviously she's going to be deported back to Ireland, and he could have gone with her without Sam, who could have gotten the death penalty. But he's like, "Look, that's not what happened, so I can't pretend that is what happened." So the final scene, mercifully, thank God, is Charles, Sam, and Henrietta. They're at the boat pier as Charles is sent back to Ireland. So Charles has been deported back to Ireland. For whatever reason, it doesn't look like Henrietta's going to be sent back because maybe they can't prove that she killed her brother. It seemed like she was going to be sent back to answer for her crimes of the killing her brother Dermot, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. So they kind of all say their goodbyes, and the end are a happier note. Good for them, not for us. But yeah, that's the end of the film. Thank God.
Yeah, thank God that's over. What a boring film.
It's not good.
No, I gave it 1.5 stars. I literally fell asleep. Like, this film bored me to tears, and I cannot wait to just talk about next week's film. Genuinely, that's my review. I was so bored that all I could think about was the next film that we're gonna watch.
I think.
What's your review?
So I gave it 2 stars. I don't hate it as much as you. I definitely do not like it. Like, I think. I didn't think it was like incredibly dreadful or anything, but The one thing I'd say that we haven't even touched on yet, really, because we just want to get this thing over with, is
Yeah.
we talked last week about rope, and it's kind of one take technique structures. There are a few scenes in this where Hitchcock basically tries to copy that, especially in scenes within the house. And there's a couple of scenes where it doesn't work out too badly, but for the most part, he doesn't execute it anywhere near as well. And it's one of the reasons I would say why, narratively speaking, this thing is just all over the place, really. And then you couple that with the fact that there are basically no characters you can actually identify with. Maybe Henrietta to an extent, because she's going through a bad time, but even then she makes a bunch of bad decisions. Yeah, look, it's
very dialogue heavy as well, and the dialogue's not interesting.
It's not, and I'm not a fan of period dramas myself. I know some people will be, so maybe this is going to be more their bag. It doesn't have the worst letterbox score. I think it might be over three stars. So look, maybe it's just those two. Maybe like it could be more other people's kind of bag, but it's just not my kind of thing at all. These period dramas. It's not a good film. If you're looking for this kind of film, Rebecca does so many of these things so much better.
Yeah,
whether it be both films deal with a kind of the kind of love at first sight kind of thing, deals with kind of crimes of passion, deals with the kind of love triangles, deals with a kind of evil housemaids. Although again, Mrs. Danvers is so much more interesting than Millie in this film. Yeah. So like Rebecca,
Judith Anderson's so great in that role as well.
It's brilliant. It's a great film. Lots of great performances. So if you're looking for the kind of period drama, a lot at the time, I suppose Rebecca wasn't a period drama. It was just a contemporary film at the time. But like if you're looking for that kind of film where it's all about social status and it's about the kind of crimes of passion and these kind of things, and set in big houses, Manderley's a brilliant location. Yeah, watch Rebecca. It's a lot better, because I think it's interesting how Hitchcock starts his 40s with this kind of film and he ends it with a very similar film, but they're way different in terms of the execution.
And that's 1940s Hitchcock, as well as Under Capricorn. We will have a ranking video come out sometime between the release of this episode and the release of the next episode. I can't tell you what day of the week it'll be, but it'll be between this week and next week's episode. And yeah, Shane, I think it's time for in this case you, to announce what is next week's episode going to be. What are we all watching next week?
So I've probably mentioned a few times on this podcast that Billy Wilder is one of my favourite directors of all time. I definitely think he's my favourite writer-director in terms of someone who co-wrote or wrote every single one of his films. I just think the guy was a genius. I'll talk about that more next week and why I think that. And he's one of the most interesting people to have kind of worked in Hollywood as well for so many reasons. So I'll talk about that next week. But yeah, Stalag 17 is a film set in a prisoner of war camp in World War II. And anyone who knows anything about Billy Wilder knows why World War II and the Holocaust was such an important part of his life. And I'll talk about that why next week, but it's on Google. It's quite heavy. But yeah, so it's set in a prisoner of war camp. But the reason I wanted to show this film in particular is because, first of all, William Holden won Best Actor at the Oscars for his lead role. But it's also, I think it's an incredible Wilder film, I should say, not Hitchcock. It's an incredible Wilder film because he manages to balance so many tones in this thing. So it's a film set in a prisoner of war camp in which the characters want to find a mole. So I won't say anything more than that, but it incorporates kind of a war drama, a screwball comedy, so many more things in between. So yeah, I'll talk about that more next week. That's all I'll leave you for now. But Stalag 17 is next week's episode, and again, I'll say why next week. And yeah, I think people are going to like that one if they give it a chance.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've seen a fair few Wilder films. I've seen like 7 of his movies, I think 6 or 7 anyway. I know you've seen all of them. I've seen 6 or 7, and I really, really enjoyed most of them that I've seen. Wasn't huge on Sabrina, but anyway, yeah, that's the Golden Hour Film Podcast, and next week, as Shane said, is Stalag 17. I can't wait. It's a new film for me on the podcast. So I think it's the first time we've ever done a film that I haven't seen that you have seen, so that'll be an interesting one. And yeah, Next week, Stalag 17. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Mulvaney.
And this has been 1940s Alfred Hitchcock. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much.